What do you do when your faith system no longer fits? Because sometimes you outgrow it. Sometimes you graduate, you ascend, you leave the old, itchy, worn-out way, and you begin to walk in the new. Sometimes you grow. Join the conversation with me, Tony Werfel, author, speaker, teaching pastor, as we help unwrap and rebuild a faith that no longer fits. We learn to walk into the new, messy journey called life. Hello, everyone, and welcome back again. I just want to thank you all for all the emails of support and encouragement that you continue to send. I know this is not like the number one podcast on iTunes, but it is. We're doing well. We're having fun, and this podcast it's just as much for me, I think, as it is for you, because I think deconstructing elements of faith that don't work anymore, places of cognitive dissonance, it's so important to deconstruct this. Yet I would argue it's also important to begin reconstructing. So it's easy to destroy something. It's easy to break things down, especially when you consider different elements of the faith systems that many of us have grown in. But finding ways to put things back together again, to find real meaning, to construct something that works for you, that takes work. And that's what we're doing here. So again, welcome. And if you find this thing, if it's been helpful at all for you, please share it with friends, and let's continue moving this conversation in the right direction, because I think this needs to happen. So I grew up in a tradition, a narrative that said life is to be endured here on earth until we go up there. And I was told meaning is to be found when we're gone from here again and we're somewhere else. So when I look at Christianity, though, and I begin to understand some of the deeper issues that these early people were dealing with, and I begin to understand their story, what I find, though, is that that's not at all what the narrative was about. What Christianity is supposed to offer is very different from what the institutional church has been fixating on. And so this notion that life on this planet is something that we endure until death, which actually is a really sad narrative, that's actually pretty gross. It's a far cry from the actual message of Jesus. So what if life after death is not what this movement is about? When you read the Jewish rabbi Jesus, you're going to see that Christianity it's about transformation, this new kingdom, here and now, so that we can live fully alive right now. So when I read the stories, I don't actually read much about an escape from here for meaning. You don't find that much. Leaving behind the material world, you don't see that much unless you try to read those things into the passage. What I read is that in order to find meaning, you have to look at the material world. This is where you find meaning and purpose and beauty. It's right here. And I get that this is a small shift, but when you understand this, it really makes a huge difference. Because life happens when we're able to find meaning now, and it often takes an experience. And I would argue it takes a moment of your eyes being opened. For many of us, this shift is never going to happen if we continue on with life as typical as it is it going to the same place to find meaning, carrying the same baggage. I think you get what I mean here. It's never going to change unless you have a moment of change where the scales fall from your eyes. And so with that, obviously, this metaphor, there's this interesting story in Acts 19. And it's kind of the starting point for the New Testament, really. And they're outlining kind of how this movement moved after Jesus. It's, is no longer with them, yet it's retelling the story before the temple's destroyed. So in this chapter, Saul, who's Paul, so kind of confusing, Saul is Paul. They talk about Saul before this experience. His name is Saul. And he's this interesting guy. His message to his people is that violence in the way of Rome is to be embraced by the Jewish people. So his campaign of going and murdering all these Jesus followers, It's actually very Roman-like. So he has this message, and his people will only have meaningful lives if they can end this Christian movement of people walking in this new reality. So the story goes that Saul is walking, and on the walk, again, he's doing his thing. He's walking those normal roads, those roads that don't really fully fit who you are anymore, but you're still walking them. Paul's still walking them, and he has this encounter. And we're told it changes everything. And I think we've all had these moments when something shifts, we've had to rethink things. And Saul is resistant to it. He doesn't accept it as far as the story goes. And so in the story, he's blinded, and he comes face to face with the one he's persecuting. Beautiful, right? When you come face to face with someone that you're persecuting, when you come face to face with a thing that you're trying to ignore, or maybe you've been saying this thing is wrong all along, and then you've come face to face with something that shifts, life changes. And so for Paul, the idea is he's blinded, and there are scales over his eyes. And again, I get this all sounds a bit far-fetched for many people, but listen for the meaning here. It's not it's not Paul that does much of anything here. The story shifts after Paul has this moment to this character Ananias. And Ananias is actually an enemy of Paul or Saul, the ones he's persecuting. So Ananias, the story shifts to him, and he's told he needs to go to Saul and heal him. So watch this. Saul's only going to find healing from his enemy. So it's going to take some vulnerability on Saul's behalf to even consider being healed. And when they meet, we're told the scales, when Saul allows himself to be vulnerable and allows his enemy to come face to face with him, the scales fall from his eyes. So there's a moment when Saul comes face to face with the mystery, face to face with his enemy, and it causes him to rethink everything. So it actually causes him to rethink his story too. He has to see things from a place, from his enemy's place that just healed him. And he has to stop and be vulnerable enough to allow that change to take place. And so let's be honest, most people aren't vulnerable enough to say 3 words that the ancients felt were holy. And these 3 words are terrifying to people. The words are, I don't know. For Saul, it was, I can't heal myself. I don't know. When I've encountered people in churches, leaders who don't always agree with things I say or believe, when you pose a question or you make them uncomfortable with something they wholeheartedly believed until your question was posed, they'll do everything they can to shore that thing up. They'll give as quick of an answer as they can. They'll try to cover it up, seal it up, move on. They'll give you a bunch of like out of context verses to try to make the thing fit. But the problem is, most of us, we've wisened up to this. And we understand their answers, they don't really satisfy anymore. In their pride and the fear, they're quick to give you an answer that's going to satisfy their fear, their concern, but not yours. And so the best answer, the one that the desert fathers actually use the most when talking about the mysteries of life, death, actual creation, the world, they would utter the words, I don't know. But here's the thing. To utter those words, you have to be vulnerable. And that's not easy for a system that claims they have the corner on truth, right? We have the truth. So Paul here, the reason I share the story of Paul is that Paul's an example of the humility it takes to find healing. He had to allow his enemy in, and his paradigm had to shift. To admit that he may not have had the answers, or he may have been wrong. He had to allow that to happen. And so when he admits, I don't know, when he admits, I don't have the answers to this healing. I don't have the answers to the blindness I'm experiencing. When he does this, the scales fell off. And it's beautiful. There's a powerful meaning there. And really, this is not a new story for Israel. It's one repeated over and over again in their epic narratives. So every important figure, they have these moments of awakening, a moment when they vulnerably step into the mystery. And so for Paul, it was the mystery of understanding someone he thought was an enemy. For Moses, though, it was actually the mystery itself. For Moses, he's left Egypt. He's run from his past. He's had to learn and unlearn certain things there in the desert. So this is what's happening for Moses. And I wonder, have you ever left something behind in your past? You kind of hope you never have to go there again. Like maybe you leave a relationship. You hope that you'll never maybe have to see that person again. You'll never have to hear their name mentioned again. You leave them behind. Or maybe you left a job or a tradition, a place that you kind of try your best to avoid it now. The problem is when you do this, sometimes though, in order to be really truly healed, you have to look back in order to move forward. So Moses, what he's doing is he's tending his sheep in chapter 3, and he's moved into this new life, and yet he's not fully experiencing wholeness yet. So he needs a Paul experience, right? A moment where his eyes are open. So the story goes, he goes to the far side of the wilderness. Hear that phrase, far side of the wilderness. The far side of the wilderness, that's where things are not easily tamed. There's for the Hebrews, it was the idea that there's some wildness there. The far side, the far side's not comfortable. So for Moses to move into the new way of being, he had to move into the uncomfortable. Anyone out there in a job that's become too comfortable? Maybe in a relationship, the thing is comfortable, but you're really not growing anymore. That relationship you're in, you're great roommates now, but you're not really growing. You're not really living anymore. The thing isn't flourishing. You're not reaching your full potential where you are. I would say in order to grow, you'll have to move. You'll have to grow. You'll have to talk about the uncomfortable thing in the air. I'll quote my favorite story growing up. You'll have to go where the wild things are, right? You'll have to go to the edge. To quote one of my favorite science fiction writers, Kurt Vonnegut, he says, you'll have to stand on the edge because it's from there you see all kinds of things you wouldn't see from the center. And so you start seeing when you move to the edge. You start to have a bigger perspective. When you start to have those difficult conversations, you'll have to climb the mountain because now the mountain's in front of you. You become aware of it. And so again, the story goes that Moses gets to this place on the far edge of the wilderness, and there's this mountain. And so again, for the Hebrews, mountains were the places of expectancy. So tribes, you can read all throughout different histories of different tribal groups and their stories. Many of them, especially when you look at Native American stories, many of them, you would climb the mountain in order to have experiences or triumphs of renewal, like to restart your journey, your life. So Moses goes to the edge. He climbs the mountain, like the writers will have him do later on again. He'll go up to Mount Sinai. It's there when he climbs the mountain that he meets this burning bush. And the story goes, he climbs this mountain, and there he sees a burning bush that's not really burning up. And so essentially he experiences something strange and mysterious. It's something he doesn't understand. And he's questioning it. He's not sure. And he has to utter the words here, I don't know. I don't know. The idea is he's in wonder. And what happens next is that he's instructed, take off your sandals. Now for us, that doesn't seem like a big deal, or others, we've heard others say our whole lives, well, he has to, it's holy ground. But don't miss something here. Sandals are worn for protection in the desert. The desert's hot. Taking your sandals off was a vulnerable thing to do. You didn't do that in the desert. You kept your sandals on. There under the sand were all sorts of things you would step on, from thorns to snakes. Take your sandals off was a sign of standing in absolute vulnerability. Moses, what the idea here is, he takes off his sandals. He drops his guard. He allows the mystery to speak. He delves into it. So Moses can only step into the mystery by allowing himself to be vulnerable to it. He has to admit he doesn't know what's going on. And the Hebrews call that kind of action holy ground. When we become vulnerable, say the holy phrase, I don't know. Allow an enemy to bring us healing. In those moments, there's an electricity. The Hebrews call that holy. What happens after death? How did the world begin? This. What if instead of trying to shore everything up, instead of trying to use this ancient text to try to scientifically explain everything, what if you just said, like the ancients did, I don't know. Science is doing its best to explain it. History is doing its best, but I don't know. When you do that, the Hebrews say, you are standing on holy ground. And the interesting comment made is that the ground he's standing on, this holy ground, it's always been there. The opportunity's always been there. The ground's always been holy. He's just now becoming aware of it. His vulnerability opened him up to the opportunity to observe the divine mystery and experience some deep, deep healing. Let me share this story. When I was doing some remembering, when I was working with this therapist, she helped me remember a moment in my childhood. She actually helped me remember many, but one of them was pretty interesting. In our house, for a time, there was a lot of fighting for a bit between my parents and me, my sister. I remember just hearing arguments all the time. There were things going on I wasn't even aware of until now that I look back. I say, oh, I didn't realize that was going on. There were times that it would get actually really toxic. And I remember praying to God to fix things. I'd even go to my closet. It's where I felt safest. And I'd sit in there and I would hear the arguing. Or after an argument where I may have said or done something to play a cause in the drama, I would sit there and I remember praying really earnestly, fervently, for this God to intervene, to fix things. I'd cry myself to sleep in the closet. I'd pray and get this, nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. And it was so sad for me. There was just so much pain there. I didn't know what to do. I remember that school year after that summer, 4th grade came, and I entered 4th grade with a ton of baggage. I felt alone, sad. I didn't like myself even then. And so that's when I met her. Ms. Latigas. What a name, right? Latigas. She was probably one of the largest women I'd ever seen in my life. She had this booty that was so big that when she would have to turn sideways to get through open doors. It was this huge booty. And I even kind of still wonder today, like, how did she even fit into pants? She was enormous. And so Ms. Latigas, she would do something every morning. And I was warned by people in 3rd grade. I remember people warning me, she likes to hug kids. When you come to class, she's going to try to hug you. And I thought, no, that's not happening. I was told she would wait there at the door and you couldn't get past without getting a hug from this woman. She would just take her arms and just suffocate you with this hug. So I remember being up at night, the night before school, formulating ways to get through the window maybe of the classroom in order to avoid her the next day, I thought maybe I could like jump behind the poor kid getting hugged, avoid it, try to just get through, walk under them. I don't know. I tried everything I could think of in my mind. But when the day actually came, no avail. When I was standing there in line, I thought maybe the chance had come. I remember I was next and I tried slipping through and I felt this hand on my shoulder. And right away, I heard, "Anthony?" I knew I was busted. And so she finished hugging the poor girl in front of me and then she pulled me in and gave me this huge squeeze. And I remember her saying, "We'll make a hugger out of you, Anthony." And in that moment, I knew I probably met my greatest foe. I knew this was not going to go like I wanted it to. I'm going to have to endure this. And at the time in my life, I wasn't a hugger. I didn't like people in my space. I was an introvert. A hug is super threatening to an introverted kid. And so when getting a hug, I'd kind of like pull back my arms, arch my back. I'd have this repugnant face of disgust and I'd just kind of like, ugh, I didn't like it. That's what a hug did to me. It caused me to feel vulnerable and it made me feel out of control. So she got me the first day. The next thing I decided, I'm going to pretend to cough a bunch. Like I was sick, and that didn't pan out. I tried everything from feign illness to pretending to drop something, and this woman would not be tricked. One day I remember she wasn't at school. And I walked into the classroom, and there was like a weird chill. It was different. All week, she'd been there. And then all of a sudden, or actually all year she'd been there. But that week, she was gone. And it just felt different. Seems there was like health problems or something with her. I don't remember exactly, but there was a sub there now. And there was something about this sub. She was nice, yes, she was younger, seemed pleasant, but something I remember didn't seem right about the sub. And it took a whole week until I figured it out. I walked into the classroom and I saw a student from my little pod. She hugged the sub. And the sub actually looked as uncomfortable as I used to when I would get hugs. And I remember she looked like she didn't know what to do. She was very confused by this hug. And I remember that's when it hit me. I'd become a hugger. And I wasn't even aware of it. At some point in the school year, I must have let my guard down. At some point in the school year, I, Anthony Werfel, a non-hugger, had become a hugger. A weird kid that liked giving and receiving hugs. I was even giving hugs to like family now. I had no idea exactly when it happened. It just did. At some point, the scaly exterior crumbled. The scales fell off. And I'd become aware of something really beautiful. And I wasn't even aware of it at the moment that it was happening. I allowed myself to be vulnerable, to be hugged, to be, I would say, loved. And so the ground I'd been standing on, walking on, going to school on, it had become holy ground. I wasn't even aware of it. So for you like me, in these moments, these mysterious divine moments that we'll look back on and we'll realize just how far we've come, they were the thing that gave us air, that sustained us, gave us peace in the middle of the storm, these stormy family moments, these stormy work cultures, these storms. For us, for some of us, it took admitting we don't know what's next. It took uttering the simple phrase, "I don't know." Humbly allowing our eyes to be opened. It took that thing to cause the change. So for the ancients, they understood sometimes for healing to happen, we walk fully into the unknown, the edge of the wilderness, the place where we come face to face with an enemy, admitting we don't know what's next, but we learn to trust the journey. Then, as the mountain becomes clear, we slowly, humbly walk forward into the questions. And while you're doing that, take a moment, Look around you. Because I'm learning right now, I've been surprised how many other fellow travelers are making their way along this journey up on this mountain with me. And the journey has been humbling, and it's filled with lots of I don't knows. There's uncertainty, many mountains to climb, but know this. As you and I climb each one of these mountains, each one of these moments, the mystery gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And my hope for you is that you'll take time to enjoy this journey, to open your eyes to just how big this mystery is. Take that next step, even if it's uncertain. Allow yourself to be loved again, even if it could mean another heartache. Start the new project, even while the old one is burning to ashes. Allow the scales to fall off. Take the sandals off. Allow that large woman to give you the big hug. Start the new thing, even if it's uncertain. Learn to be vulnerable with others. Learn to say, I don't know. And when you do this, know you're walking on holy ground. Blessings, everyone, and we'll see you next week.